Hello everybody. Good evening. Good evening. It's evening here in Hamburg. I'm in Germany, in Hamburg. And what? It's just one more minute. 1 minute to start. Right. So, good evening and welcome to my new video blog. I want to call it Citizen's Duty. And it's dedicated to just one topic, and namely how to become a good citizen in our very complex reality. Today we will speak about information and our sources. The first premise is that a good citizen means well-informed citizen, right? Because if one is ill-informed or uninformed, the chances are high that such will be his choices and decisions as he participates in procedures of democratic decision making. So yeah, information is everything. Do I need to bring examples of how people driven by best intentions do all sort of destructive and silly things? For example, they vote for some super unpleasant characters, right? It sounds familiar. Or they support criminal legislation or help to ruin economy in their own countries. Is it because they're evil or stupid or both maybe? No, of course not. It's just that their bad decisions are predefined by wrong knowledge. But what does it mean, well informed? What does it mean to be informed, and how do we get there? To answer this, we should look at information in more general terms and see how we receive it and process it. And generally, how do we know what we know? Because I know, but how? I imagine information comes from a variety of sources. We can try to group them by categories. For example, experience, education, arts and culture, media, things like that, right? There's something special about each category. At a glance, life experience, including our interaction with other people, these conversations, family, friends, and stuff, it's a source of personalized knowledge. The information we gather directly is not perfectly precise, but it is ours. And in that sense, it's quite reliable. The main problem with our experience is that it's a subject of interpretation and isn't free from our own biases. Two people look at the same thing and see an entirely different picture. Sounds familiar, right? Yes. Education provides systematic knowledge, or in other words, some sort of logical and consistent narrative about reality. It also pretends to be unbiased, and in theory, it can be. For example, if you study archives, some historical documents. The quality of education, however, might depend on who the educators. Even fascist regimes, they also had science and education and whatever, so such is their education. Literature and arts communicate values and philosophies along with some factual information. The power of this source is in giving you food for thought, and it's less direct and more subtle narrative about the world. You have to fill in lots of gaps, connect the dots, as they say. So it's like more creative way, demanding from you, to think. And in that sense, this is an invaluable source of information about the world, right? And then we have media. It covers events of the day, literally in real time. It is the most dynamic and perhaps the most important source that we have, and altogether the most unreliable. Media is an important tool shaping modern society. Now let's try to play with these ideas a little bit. I suggest that we take several keywords or topics. For example, Russia, USA, and Iran. And now let's try to list all main sources of our knowledge about each subject and also split them by categories. For example, medium, movies, I don't know, a friend told me something, I read something from another friend of friend, things like that. Different types of sources. So some personal experience mixed up with some information we read somewhere, and maybe some education is into. And now let's try to add percentage, how big or little percent of information we receive through each category of knowledge. Out of the top of our head, it doesn't have to be precise. We can't do it precisely anyway, but we can try just evaluate. So what percentage of information on each of these topics comes from media? That's interesting. And finally, let's try to evaluate the attitude of our sources. Is the information received from this channel mostly positive, neutral, or mostly negative? We can also make it at a glance. It doesn't have to be precise. And now we can look at the results of our little experiment and discuss them. How our perception of the world is shaped by our sources. Sources versus personal experience. What are our main sources? How do they differ depending on the topic in focus? Let's see if we can spot media biases. For my own use, I made a little table here. It's very simple, like 4x4. Subject, list resources, percentage, objectivity, 1 to 3, things like that. And now let's analyze it. I will try to guess without even seeing your results, because it's simple enough, you will see. So your sources on subjects familiar or local to you are much more diverse than sources covering some remote stuff. Well, your sources, my sources, I mean everybody's. So if you are based in the USA, you probably know the whole lot of things about your country, right? It's a mixture of personal experiences and interactions with other people, what you heard or learned from family, friends, acquaintances through your educational process, school, high school, work, literature, then mass culture, I don't know, church, everything, all sort of interactions with the world around you. And of course, a variety of media channels. And since you are living in this country, you consume a lot of information from many media channels. But when you look at some remote place or subject, you see, I try to keep it very general, this whole talk. It's about information, not even necessarily about politics. However, we apply it to social problematics and to politics, yes, because the blog is about citizens' duty. We need to apply our knowledge to this subject. But it can be anything. So any remote subject, you can see how the diversity of your sources instantly shrinks to a very narrow collections of mostly media channels. Well, if we speak about still like, okay, political stuff. Yeah, if we speak about something scientific, it might be only like some scientific resources. All right. So in our example, Russia, as an American, you probably read, I don't know, 2 or 3 Russian writers who all died like 100 years ago. You haven't seen a single Russian or Soviet movie. Well, typically, some people, I know people who actually dig it, but it's rather unusual. And you mostly draw your knowledge about the country from US media and Hollywood. As an American, you probably know nothing about Iran, except some rumors about their nuclear something. That's it. Your knowledge about familiar subjects is distributed between different sources more or less evenly. That's another important idea. So that media, and it can be very diverse as such, claims only a share of information that you possess. So when we talk about an American about America, you know a whole lot of things from a whole lot of info channels, including your own rich life experience. But when you, an American, talk about Russia, it's like 80 or 90% of your knowledge comes from, I don't know, New York Times or from Hollywood movies, and the rest is shared between what Solzhenitsyn, Tchaikovsky, and Dostoevsky. And when it comes to Iran, it's like 100% of your knowledge comes from New York Times, well, from the media, from US media. And now, speaking of objectivity, you can fill in the gaps yourself. Mostly positive, mostly negative, or neutral. I think it's funny if you do it yourself. So, in one of our next programs, we will speak about media in more detail. And right now, I don't want to branch the conversation and try to cover several important topics in one video. I want to keep it short. So here I only offer you an axiom. Media is never unbiased. Corporate or state, also known as mainstream media, is never free. Never. And thus, when most of your knowledge about a given subject comes from the media category of sources, and it isn't backed up by your personal experience, education, and other sources, then it's a roulette. There's a good chance that everything you know is wrong. It's hard to make important decisions in the area of international politics because we know too little, and our knowledge and opinions can be manipulated by the media, our only source. There's more to it, however. We face similar problems when we have to make important domestic decisions or choices, whether we speak about elections, some referendum, or any other issue requiring public attention and participation. The information field is usually polluted by propaganda and populism coming from every side of a discourse. And as one crying example, screaming example, I like to take everybody's favorite topic, the US elections, so Trump versus Biden. It's probably safe to say that for millions of Americans, I'm not saying for all, but for a lot, for millions, the diversity of media sources is limited to either blue or red-aligned media. I will bring you one example. I chatted with my friend who is a liberal Democrat, American, very strongly anti-Trump person, right? And I brought to his attention something from Tucker Carlson, who is a known Fox News anchor, I don't know what it's called, known media persona, and who offers a narrative that I would describe as what he says makes a lot of sense, let's put it this way. And he is kind of critical of generally Democrats, Biden in particular, and of all this resistance. But the way he does it, all right, it doesn't matter. I'm just giving you an example of reaction. So my friend said, no, just throw it away. Tucker Carlson, ha, ha, ha. It's not a source that I'm even going to look at. Then I brought something else, alrighty, but let's have a look at this article by Glenn Greenwald. So this time I offered to him material from the so-called alternative media. It's not blue or red. It's not pro-Trump. It's not, for God's sake, for Republicans or something. Glenn Greenwald is a very well-known journalist and a big character in this world of alternative media. His project Intercept, no, he said, no one of my friends thinks that Greenwald is any interesting or credible. It's total garbage, and I don't even want to spend my time looking into it. Alrighty, but what if I offer to your attention a material from Russia Today? Because you see, Biden in particular left a lot of footprints all around Russia, in this recent story in Ukraine. And so he was one character. He is one character who is, well, we can't be neutral to him from people who, no, he acted a lot in that area, all right, let's put it this way. And there's a lot to say about his adventures in Ukraine and his sons and all that. Burisma corruptions him and how he manipulated Ukrainian politics for his own interest. No, said my friend, I don't want to see it. Are you laughing at me? You want me to read or watch Putin's media? So in other words, this example for me is a very telling, because it reveals a very common attitude of an ordinary citizen in our global world, right? And it's not only about Americans, and it's not, I only brought it as an example. Lots of people, like countless millions of people, do exactly this. They kind of join some camps, and they won't listen nothing coming from some other camp, as they imagine, that doesn't basically support the ideas that they already have. So they would never challenge their comfort zone, never leave it, and never challenge their narratives. And of course, similar media divides exist in many other, well, in most countries, I imagine. In Russian Federation, I know for sure. And similarly, people are biased and polarized, and so are their sources. But now I will ask you, how accurate are your judgments, and how mature is your thinking, and how valid is your democratical expression when you go to vote for someone? How, if we really think for a sec about not just fighting for our team, but about trying to build a more fair, a better society. And supposedly democracy is exactly about that people can participate and build something together, agree or disagree, discuss, review, and come up with some perfect solutions. But how can you expect that when people don't want to listen anything that doesn't basically fit what they preach and what they stick to? It's just not. Well, I can tell you what needs to be done. No, it's in one of the next videos. And for now, I'd like to say this. So what do we do? So, okay, you see, I am critical of this attitude, but what do I propose, for example? What is the solution? What is the solution? How? Remember the main topic of this blog, how to be a better citizen, how to become a better citizen. What is our citizens' duty? What is it? How to improve? Let me tell you. Here is my 3-steps plan. How to deal with sources. And this particular episode is all dedicated to sources and sources only, nothing else. There are, of course, other aspects, but it will be discussed separately. So, sources. Step number 1, be aware. It's crucial to realize that our knowledge comes from external sources. If we receive false information and base our opinions on it, there's a good chance that our picture of reality is not adequate to our conclusions, and actions all can be wrong. We should understand this, be aware of this. This is number one, a big one. The second step, if you wish, access information that you have on this subject. Assess information that you have on this subject before making decisions. For example, before voting, what do you actually know? Where do you know it from? Review structure of your sources. Make sure it isn't media only. And within the media category of sources, try to diversify channels. Make sure you hear different voices, different narratives, different points of view. Your resulting narrative doesn't have to be just like a mechanical sum up and divide, something in the middle. No, truth is not always the middle. No, but you should be well acquainted with all the existing, at least main existing narratives describing the situation. You should hear different sides of the conflict. Well, it's like in kindergarten, when children have the little fight and parents need to interfere. A bad parent would just say, my child is right and this child needs to be punished. He is the bad one. He started the fight. But a good parent would try to listen to them, understand what happened, and maybe find out that it was his child who wasn't correct in this episode. And he would try to pacify the situation, but also explain and educate his own child, right? So I imagine here it's the same. It's not about mechanically winning at whatever cost. And I'm not talking about Trump, Biden. I'm talking about every social kind of interaction where there's a problem of making choices based on information. So we really need to review our sources and then make sure we're exposed to different points of view, and we can evaluate them, and we try to be as unbiased as possible. That's like very important. And if we come back to the example of elections, of course, a good American citizen should hear what his party that he supports is saying, but he has to hear what is the opposite party. Like, well, I mean, they have just two parties, so easy. So you need to hear liberals, you need to hear conservatives, but you really want to hear also alternative media community, all these dissidents. What do they say, and why they're so skeptical about the events? And then you, of course, want to hear foreign media, and not just from US NATO bulb or what it's called, but also from different pools, because we're talking about an event of big international importance. I mean, who is the new US president, for example, or different decisions about politics and stuff like that. And finally, my third step would be, I'd say it's the most important and kind of hard. Have guts to admit that you don't know enough. And then either learn or just relax. You don't have to talk about things you don't understand. You don't have to make a fool out of yourself. A lot of people do, unfortunately. They look like fools, yes, in the end. And you don't have to vote for people who you don't like. Not acting is definitely better than doing something stupid and ugly. In certain situations, boycott is a powerful manifestation of your will as a citizen. And here we have the small disagreement with my German friend. She believes in democracy and considers it very important that people actually vote. She also pointed that in Germany, there's an option to vote for neither of the offered candidates. So basically, there is an option, nobody. Okay, well, sure. What I'm saying here is bigger than elections, and it doesn't cover elections in one particular country. I just brought US elections as one kind of very big example again. So, of course, political systems can vary in different countries. And for example, in Germany, they have several parties, not just two, and the votes are distributed more or less, evenly. Some has 10%, some has 15%, the other has like 20, but it's not like 50-50. So it does sound and look like democracy is somehow working here. What I'm saying is that not acting is definitely better than doing something stupid and ugly. I want to repeat it. So if you don't think it's, if you reviewed your knowledge, if you assessed it, if you make a very conscious choice, no, well, such is your choice in the end. But just, kind of try to diversify sources. Because if you support something very, very bad, then you will feel sorry, and history knows examples. Again, I am here in Hamburg, which was bombed flat. Okay, but that's another story. And as a bit of a conclusion, I'd like to say a few words, like to close it. Our sources are critical for building an adequate picture of the world. No more, no less. Because everything we know from somewhere. So it's like our world is shaped by things we learn. So by the channels of information we are kind of feeding ourselves from. Information that we have predefines our decisions and actions as citizens, and in that sense is vital for the functioning democratic process. That's why if we care to become even better citizens, we should exercise every opportunity to expand our knowledge, our understanding of what's going on around. We can't be lazy. Lazy citizen is a bad citizen, is a bad democrat. If you are lazy, you deserve someone who would take decision for you, right? Learn. The Institute of Media is a standalone provider of information that sources us with current data on what's going on in the world. It's a single category of sources that shapes our views to a high extent, and it's the most manipulative source. The best we can do is diversify our media channels. I said it like 5 times or 6 already, but it's the main message I have for you today. And seek to back up them with information from other sources. We will speak about media in one of our coming episodes. It's useful to remember that most of the time we are not talking about the world, but about the world as we know it. Mind the difference. That's about it. Life is not an article, and it's not a documentary that you just, read somewhere, watch somewhere. We don't read our idea of the world in a newspaper. We build it up our entire life, year after year. And in the next episodes of Citizens' Duty, we will continue looking at various aspects of our interaction with so-called reality, and how this process of building our world happens, and what are the main bricks. And also we will talk a lot about communication, because obviously there are problems here as well. People don't understand each other. People do very bad communication, honestly, and it's unfortunately super common. So we will look why and what can be improved. Thank you very much for watching this, and hope it wasn't too boring or something. And I'm glad I had a chance to tell you a little bit what kind of occupies my mind, when I'm not working, or when I'm not with family. I'm thinking about this kind of stuff. Right. Thank you and ciao. Goodbye. Where is this button now? Okay. Ciao.